All right. Welcome to the first Game Audio Maryland MAGFest panel. We are all very excited that you guys came out this evening to join us. We have a very interesting discussion for you tonight with some amazing people from the game industry, and we just appreciate that you're here. So what we're going to do is we're going to let these lovely people introduce themselves. We're going to go down the line so you learn a little bit about who they are, but just a 10-second intro about myself. My name is Andre Shulgach. I am the co-founder. Thank you very much. We go way back. I am the co-founder of Game Audio Maryland. I've been working in the game industry I've been making games for almost 20 years. Started on the indie side, worked on AAA, worked on indie, work in audio now specifically. So love games very much. They've been a huge part of my life, and the game audio community has been amazing. And 10 years ago, I started coming to MAGFest, and it's really cool to actually be here now and have seen the community grow, and you are all an example of what makes it so great. So that's just a little bit about me.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Ng, and I am the founder and president emeritus of the Gamer Symphony Orchestra at the University of Maryland, which is the first collegiate video game orchestra. And I'm also a co-founder here at Game Audio Maryland, and my passion is video game orchestras and orchestral video game music, and I'm looking very forward to tonight's panel with our guests.
All right. Now, let's go down the line. Please, go ahead. The mic.
I'm Michael Curran. I'm audio director at Oxide Games in Timonium, Maryland. Started working in games about 22 years ago at Firaxis. Started working on Civ games, beginning with Civ 3. Was lead on Civ 5, Beyond Earth, and worked my way to Oxide Games, which is right down the street from Firaxis. And we worked a long time, 6 years, on Aura History Untold, which was released 3 months ago, which is my most recent project. And I'll probably be talking about that a little bit later.
I'm Joshua Smith. Currently, I'm audio director at an indie studio called Ruckus Games, a startup combining a lot of industry veterans, kind of like a lot of places these days. I spent about a combined 10 years working at ZeniMax Online and Bethesda on Fallout and Elder Scrolls titles, a little bit on Starfield. Recently, I just spent 2 years in Sweden at IO Interactive, helping them kind of define the feel and sound for their new IP that they're working on there. And now I'm back here in America doing that again.
Hi, I am Megan Frazier. I got started in game audio as a sound designer for AltSpace VR. Kind of bopped around here and there, Niantic, HTC, working with the headsets, that sort of thing. And then I just am in the process of releasing our first big title, Mind Over Magic for Sparky Pants.
The mic's a little closer. Yeah, so we can hear you better. Awesome. Okay. So now, just a little bit about what we're going to be going into tonight. This is going to be a little bit more of a deep dive, and the topics are going to be surrounding VR versus non-VR sound design, so some of the overlaps in what is similar about them and also what makes it different, because we have quite a diverse range of experience here on the panel. So we'll get to see a little bit about how different sound design can be in the industry, but also in the ways that it is similar. Also talking about workflows, the process in which you actually work on these projects, and some insights into really what that's like in detail, and not just hey, I make cool sounds and I implement it, or I write this music and then I implement it, but we're gonna get a little bit more into how that stuff actually works. And also, this is MAGFest, and there are a lot of musicians here, and there's a lot of orchestral players here, and there's a lot of overlap in the industry, so we're going to be talking a little bit about what that is like and working with musicians in the industry. So, with that being said, we're going to dive right in here. So we have a lot of technical experience here with us today, so we're going to take advantage of that and start by going into VR. So what makes VR sound unique? Megan, you want to take this one? Kick us off?
So I think that the most important and the biggest thing that you should take away from this is that good sound is good sound. VR is just extra bits. And I'm going to talk about some of those extra bits, and some of those extra bits are really cool, guys. But the end of the day, like, a lot of this is just smoke and mirrors. We are cheating the angle all the time. And it really comes down to just understanding the creative pipeline and doing all of that part. And the tech is just the tech, and it's just how we get to the end, if that makes sense. So first thing I'm going to take you through is the HRTF. This stands for Head Related Transfer Function. It is basically the calculation of how to simulate, like, how do we hear, like, on a fundamental physics level, and how do we translate it so the computer can actually understand that, right? So, like, when you hear sound, right, we've got some speakers over there, it's propagating sound waves in there. Most of us have 2 ears, as far as I can see, right? We got 2 ears. Those speakers are propagating. You're going to hear it out of your guys' left ear more than the right, based on speed and math, right? So the biggest calculation that we're taking into effect when we're doing a head-related transfer function is how wide is your head. So how big is your head, guys? The second most important part of it is the shape of your ear. Every single person's ear is unique, which makes it incredibly difficult to replicate, like what is the most generalized pinna, as we call them. And so there's a lot of people who try and do personalized, like HRTFs by actually taking into account your pinna. Additionally, you've got like sound, like waves will bounce off of your chest. So that is also, like, the secondary reflections of how large your chest is, right, is also a part of that calculation. Additionally, if you have sound propagating from up, like for example, like in VR, you're like clicking like select, right, like click, right? If you're doing that from below and the sound is coming from below, there's going to be a head shadow effect, right? Because again, the sound in real life will not go directly through your skull. And you will actually hear that. Like, dude, when my cat is like, hey, it's time for kibble, and he's going, meow, it would sound weird if it went directly through my head, right? Like, there is actually shadow. One other thing to know about HRTF, like the research papers, all that kind of stuff, most people can differentiate along this plane of axis within about a degree of accuracy. So if you're trying to like do like effectively a panning like situation between like where the actual sound of like the dragon is coming from, they're going to be able to detect it's off if you are 1% off. When you're going in this plane, the Y plane, it's about 10 degrees off. So you like when you have like little like basically had this really cool like arc of speakers, and they went beep 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 beep, right? And then you're like saying it comes from here, it comes from that speaker, it comes from like you had like a little laser, right? Like that speaker, that speaker. People couldn't differentiate up and down by about 10 degrees. We thought that was really interesting, or at least I did. Another part of it is that brain plasticity is fairly like intense. You can train people to like hear better effectively. There was one study where they actually like taped down people's ears to their like head, and they couldn't actually like really spatialize very well there anymore. After about 2 weeks, they actually just spatialized completely normally. This is because the brain is plastic. It will change. It can learn. However, when you're doing like expectations versus reality, if you put bird sounds on the ground, people will always look up. 100% of the time, bird sounds come from the sky. That is just ingrained in us, like fundamentally. However, one of the cool things about VR is that you can actually like use gameplay elements to get them to look up, whereas in traditional flatty like VR or video games, it can get difficult to make players look up because they just like, dude, I'm just doing my thing. Why would I look up? So yeah. One other thing, basically I wanted to kind of talk about the audio SDK, or software development kit. So you've got like this piece of information that sits on the camera, effectively, as you're like turning around in your virtual world, right? You do need the ability to say, that is a wall, and it is this kind of like density matter, if that makes sense. Because it's going to sound different if you make it a concrete density versus, like, I would assume this is wood or like, you know, drywall, right? It's going to have a different density, and it's going to sound different based on like how it propagates throughout the virtual world that you've like made. So here are a couple of them that I have. I worked at HTC, so I use 3DSP. Steam Audios is still in effect. Meta used to have one. However, they haven't been using it. Like, it was defunct when I left HTC, so I don't even know if they're still doing it. But yeah, it can get a little finicky because you have to basically assign every single like item like effectively a density, and you have to like craft the whole world. But that being said, it's usually not a big deal if you, depending on the application. For example, like there was this one VR thing that I was seeing that was like, you're in a like a spaceship, right? You only have to do that once, right? You have to do the actual like scene once. But if you're like trying to do like an MMO or something like huge, right? Where like it could get very, very heavy very, very quickly. So like working with the SDKs in that sense, like bang for buck, I guess, comes up a lot. Finally, I kind of want to talk a little bit about ambisonics versus binaural. So ambisonics is a skybox. It is an audio skybox. And you can turn the skybox around, but it is effectively like painted, so, if that makes sense. For example, like I recorded a train with an ambisonic microphone, first order. And so you could turn the train around and the train would still like be here, right? But you can't get closer to the train or farther away from the train other than like making it sound quieter. The spatial image is in fact like encoded in recording, if that makes sense. Whereas binaural is headlocked. If you guys ever Google the barbershop binaural experience, you will find it. It's this really cool like experience where they like took like a barbershop and like made this whole like theater thing where you like hear your hair getting cut. Oh my god, it is crazy.
How many of you have heard of that before?
Okay,
Okay,
yeah,
wow.
no, people have heard of the barbershop kind of thing. But the second you turn your head, it's over. The illusion is broken. So like why does binaural like show up in VR related kind of technologies? It's because like you can still use it for things. I like to use it for your UI specifically because like most of those are very, very short little transients. So it just makes sense like to just record on a dummy like the sound coming from like the correct angle that we want it to be like emanating from below for left click, right click, right? And you know, I've also thought of like one other really cool one was like having like whispers like around, you know, like you've got like this creepy horror effect thing where it doesn't really matter if you're turning your head or not. Like it's the creepy thing like whispering right behind your ear, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's just kind of the tech of stuff. So
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I'm actually learning a lot up here too. I'm like, wow. Talking about some of the limitations here, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So this is a little bit more of a rant than like, the biggest thing that we're having trouble with in the hardware limitations is that all of audio is bound on the CPU. We can't offload into the GPU yet. And what this means is that we are hard constrained by what the CPU can do. Whereas like art, just like people keep on updating their graphics card and it keeps on getting bigger and bigger, and the games keep on getting prettier and prettier, right? So, but you can never offload like our needs onto the GPU pipeline, and that kind of is my one white whale, is that I wish someday that I can do like those real-time propagation systems like on a GPU, because it is all just spatial dupe-dupes. What does it matter whether or not it's an audio dupe-dupe versus a visual dupe-dupe? They are just data. The other thing is that in VR you have to have an extreme amount of you're constantly struggling with latency. I don't know if any of y'all have used like the Apple AirBuds, anything like that with like a spatial 3D mixing kind of stuff. Some people even get sick on it because the latency between them is just like, and we're talking minor. We're talking milliseconds of latency can make you sick, and it's just hard because you're doing it through a wireless system, and like again, if you're just a little bit off, it's an actual constraint of the hardware. Whereas if you have an actual tether, you have enough data to be able to run it through the cable and no latency between the two earphones. Other than that, the mixing on VR is a gigantic pain in the butt because you don't have the ability, once you're in the headset, right, you're experiencing the thing, you're looking at the dragon, vibing, right? You don't have the ability to have a second screen open with Wise and be like, oh, okay, we need to like do this filter here to like fiddle with the thing. Whereas like when I'm releasing like Mind Over Magic, like Wise is over here. Actually, Wise is usually here. Unity is over here, right? And I'm making edits like, okay, no, a little more. Okay, well, what happens if we did that? Maybe pitch it up, add a little bit more randomization. You know, I'm fiddling with the tool doing the sound design while it is live. With VR, it's almost kind of like this weird, like, Foley artist thing, where I'm in the headset, and, you know, my good friend over here, he's on the computer, like, making those adjustments as I'm saying, put it down 2 dB, no, add a filter. You know what I mean? All of the fidgeting has to be done in this, like, pair programming kind of perspective. Otherwise, it's just going to take forever. And you just have to do it yourself, taking off the headset, putting it back on, like, over and over again.
That's a great segue into talking about some of the overlaps when we're talking about non-VR related projects, some of the concepts that you're talking about. What about you guys, if you want to jump in here, what are some of the core principles in terms of sound design that Megan's talking about when it comes to VR that is very relevant in terms of non-VR projects, and maybe without some of those limitations, you know, what are some of the key elements here that you're focusing on?
Well, I mean, I think that a lot of studios, I know a lot of people that I talk to these days, they're bringing ambisonics kind of into, you know, flat games, just because it's a novel way to design your systems. So I know a lot of people are working on systems where that ambisonic ball is floating around the player character, and you're, you know, programmatically having the sounds come from those spaces. So there's a lot of crossover with that going on that I'm seeing people doing these days.
Yeah. Michael, what about you?
Well, you know, as I was listening, I don't have a lot of experience, or almost none, with VR. But, you know, I've worked most of my career in, you know, the 4X historical grand strategy games. And the biggest challenge there is the listener position, because it's constantly moving, you know, and under the player's control for the most part, where you're zoomed in or zoomed out, and where you place that listener is like, that's the big challenge, you know. We did, you know, and so you almost have to come up with different designs for where you are located with the camera, you know, zoomed in or kind of midway or far out. We did use ambisonics for far out because we didn't want to hear what was going on down on the ground, but we wanted to hear something interesting. So we did have an ambisonic, sorry, I can lean forward too. Yeah, we did have an ambisonic recording of ambience that, you know, because you had control of the camera, you can turn it and swivel, and you do get that spatial movement that ambisonic sound has. But, you know, it's always been a trick, you know, going back to early Civ games where you just like, you know, how do you get that listener in the right place so that you still get a spatial field of audio, you know, left, right, and rears, you know, and, you know, for lack of any other place to put it, we always put the rears at the bottom of the screen. So if you stuff, and I know that makes no sense whatsoever, but
Can you give an example of a case that you used?
oh, sure. I mean, and that goes back to, I think the first time we did that was with Civ 5. where we just decided, well, we want to be in 5.1. Well, what's in the rears, you know? And so, you know, if something is at the bottom of the screen, that's coming out the back, you know, because you never get a true behind. As you zoom in, it does pivot sort of down to, you know, towards like a first person sort of angle, but not quite, you know? And so there's nothing truly behind. At best, it's kind of like there. And so just to fake that experience, we, you know, and I don't know, I've been making these games and playing them for so many years. It now makes sense to me when I hear something from behind. I know it's either at the bottom of the screen or it is truly behind me. But yeah, I mean, that's just, you know, that's one of the challenges that we have to overcome. And we did it slightly different with Aura, using altitude to, you know, and RTPCs, you know, we used Wise in Aura, and
How many of you played Aura?
probably. Well, it came out.
The new game.
Well, it came out 3 months ago. It has amazing audio.
It is. It sounds very, very.
No one's leaving this room until you buy the game.
You know, that's all I'm going to say. It is a good game, and it didn't get a lot of push marketing-wise, but it is out there and it's playable, and it's got, you know, an enormous soundtrack and really cool audio.
7 hours of original music. everyone.
7 hours of. Yeah, I'll talk about the recording of all that later, but yeah, basically it was you know, a departure from what I'd done in the past with Civ games and even Beyond Earth after that, where I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the first 4X strategy game that has interactive, dynamic music, you know, that changes with the gameplay and looks at the data coming from the game that drives the music system. And interactive features on the map, in the world, in the living world, we call it, that play with the soundtrack. Kind of like the way, I don't know if any of you played Journey or Flower. I was really inspired by those games and how, you know, of course they were more down in it, you know, and zooming through the landscape, but they would cross particular objects in the world, and it would trigger these sounds that were musical, that went with the soundtrack. And so while we couldn't quite do that, we have lots of things in the living world in Aura that trigger musical motifs that come off of these objects and do play with the soundtrack. They're designed for whatever particular piece of music is playing at that time. So it's kind of a cool feature we did.
Well, one of the other questions that's up here that we're gonna end this section on is, what are some best practices that you wish you knew early on? There's a lot that we're talking about that you've learned over the process of working on these games, but what is something that you're like, wow, I really wish I used that technique back when I was starting?
Just like in general.
Sure.
Well, we're doing such we're kind of bleeding into the next section as well of it too.
I mean,
but we'll go into that.
I wish that earlier on I had been more focused on creating my own content and not pulling so much from libraries. I think that becoming quick as a recordist is like a very valuable trait to have, because you're going to get the best and the most original stuff if you're doing it yourself. And if you start very early building sort of that mind muscle that tells you what things to grab to make what sound so that you can get it done quickly, you know, you can operate in ways that help you move almost as quickly as you could digging through sound libraries, because at the end of the day you're still digging through finding sounds, and you can look through 2,000 door creaks to find the right one, or you can just grab your mic and go find a door that creaks really quickly and get it done. And so I would say that like one of the earliest techniques that I wish I would have developed more strongly, because I come from an electronic music background, and so early on in my career I was very like, well, we're just going to use samples for everything, because that's what you fucking do, you use samples and synths. And over the years I became way more focused on using microphones and having my own recording gear, and now most of the time I will reach for a mic before I reach for anything else, because you have so many ideas and ways to get things done, you know. So that's what I would say.
Yeah.
So I think that the thing I would most, I guess, impart is just having a stronger sense of like production schedules, understanding how to communicate effectively without requiring meetings. One of the things that actually was really interesting coming from more of a corporate background, because like HTC, Microsoft, like these are big teams, guys. And coming to Sparky is just realizing how much time and energy is being lost in meetings that are utilizing improper communication channels. Like, and it's not even like, oh, this could have just been an email. It's more like just having only 5% or less of your week just being utilized, and you're still like nailing your production pipeline. You're just able to like see what other people are doing and know like what is coming down the pipeline, and just never getting startled. Although I got startled once or twice. I'm not saying I was never startled, but like just getting a handle on that is far more important. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say it's not so much like what I wish I would have done, but as my career progressed, there were options available that weren't available before. When I started out, I would have loved to be recording live instruments, but no one was doing that where I was at Firaxis with Civ. It was all MIDI, and they were happy with that. In terms of Foley versus libraries, I always felt like libraries are great. I'm not going to put those down at all, because there's so much there, and you can be so creative with them. I don't like to pull things out of the library and just use them as is, and I mean, unless they're like perfect. But, there's a lot of things you can do creatively, mixing and running through plugins and things to make them unique and make them yours and make them specifically work in the context that you're looking for them to work. And you don't always have time, even on a AAA budget, you don't have time to do Foley necessarily. But I do remember there was one in Civ 5, we were, they had these guys with clubs, warriors or whatever they were called, barbarians or something. There was a sound that I heard in my head that I could not find in libraries. And, but I had a really strong sense that if you threw logs at each other, like logs, about this size, just threw them at each other, that would be the sound. And it was. And that was something that I did in an afternoon, and it was fine, and it was like, that's the sound, but there was nothing in the libraries like that, But, it was only because I kind of thought, I think that's what will make that sound, and I could have been wrong, but...
We have some fans of the log sounds in the crowd.
Right. But so if you ever want to make like clubs hitting each other, that's how you do it. You throw logs at each other. You got to throw them at each other. You can't like hit a log with a log. You got to they have to be in midair colliding to get that clunk.
So this is actually a pretty good segue. When we're talking about AAA versus indie, you're talking about some of the differences in terms of the access to what you have, in terms of the way that you allocate resources, maybe the amount of time you have to work on different areas. So we're going to spend some time and go into some of the differences here.
Sure.
Just kind of go down this list. So in terms of resource allocation, what is the major difference that in terms of the indie process versus the AAA process, maybe the expectation, the speed that you're required to work at, maybe the actual approval process, how fast you're able to work and iterate. Maybe talk a little bit about that. Maybe some examples of some of the games that you did on.
I mean, probably one of the first things is that I would juxtapose against what both of us just said is that, like, I think that today in the modern era, we're kind of in this renaissance period of sound libraries. The industry has grown so much. Audio still has problems in production that it's had since my career started, but at the same time, there are enough people and resources now developing tools for us to use that understand what we need, that there are a lot of ways to speed things up really quickly, and one of those obvious places is sort of like your boutique sound libraries. Like a couple of weeks ago, one of the Discords that I'm in, someone was like, looking for a specific sound, and so it was like, oh, you need this library of neon light sounds, you know? And
Ooh,
it
I like
was,
that.
it's really good. You know, it's like $25. It's, you know, 150 sounds, and it's amazing stuff. And it's stuff that you can't easily get on your own, but it's stuff that's very specific to a need. And I think that those sorts of very specific niche things weren't out there a long time ago, but nowadays you can go to asoundeffect.com and you can very easily find exactly what you're looking for when you're, you know, with indie. Well, you know, if we're talking about indie versus AAA, they're both going to be time crunches, and they're just coming from different places. Mm-hmm. You know, in a AAA time crunch, you're pretty beholden to the schedule and the production and the pipeline and the speed at which other teams work and the speed at which they're going to be able to feed you content. In the indie realm, you're working by yourself a lot of the time, and that now your pressure is coming from the entire project. Because when you're on a team, like, you know, maybe you're the guy doing magic spells, but when you're by yourself, you're the guy doing magic spells, you're the guy writing the music, you're the guy doing footsteps, you're the guy figuring out how the rain sounds, you're the guy designing the system for how the rain sounds.
The guy throwing logs.
You're the guy throwing logs. You know, and so the production schedule will be a little looser because there isn't sort of that more corporate-y oversight to everything that you're doing, but the pressure doesn't really change because it's just coming from a different section.
Yeah, and when it comes to talking about some of the uncommon techniques, is there a difference in the way that you will solve problems based off of the scale of the project, whether we're talking indie or AAA?
I mean, I think that when you're working in indie, fast iteration is a really good way to go. Rob Bridgett, last year I think it was, he wrote a book called Leading with Sound. I don't know if anyone has read that or heard of that, but it's a really great book about working on audio. He's in AAA mostly, but I think it's very useful in general because sort of the central idea of it is to always be out in front of everybody else. And I have found working in indie that it's counter to how a lot of sound designers work. You know, we're very used to kind of being fed content. But like when I started with Ruckus, one of the first things I did is as I got the feel for the game and the world and everything, I just started making content about the world. One of the artists would draw a character that I thought was funny, so I'd make a commercial on a radio station with this character in it, and then I'd just send it out to the studio, and that would feed everybody more ideas on how to do things. And we've been working on weapons, and so while the animator's still animating the weapon's motions, while the designers are still deciding what the weapon fully does, I just know what it looks like. You can kind of see it in game. The effects haven't been made for it. I go ahead and I make sounds for it. And then I put it in the game and I play it for everybody, and I say, you know, I made it sound like this because it has these kind of parts and it sort of looks like this, so I made it sound like this. And I just go, and then everyone else can it helps the process because everybody else can flow behind it. And then I can come back around later to make any changes.
How often are your sounds influencing the final designs of some feature or a weapon or some type of element of gameplay?
I would say right now with, you know, we're rolling up into production right now, so we're still pretty early days. You know, we've kind of been going through our first kind of weapon pipeline. And I would say that I was able to have a pretty good effect on how the package evolved by getting in and doing a bunch of sounds first for everything. So, it depends on the part of the world, I guess, the part of the game that you're working on. With a thing like a weapon, it's very easy to get out in front of things because a lot of this stuff is data driven, and that's another thing that I would say to focus on is trying to work in a data driven manner. If you're working in indie and you are trying to get things done quickly, you want to be able to dive into the tech that people are making, pull things out quickly and just be like, oh, well, can you just put a hook in there for me and then I can just play my sound there and then we don't have to think about it anymore. And that allows you to move really quickly, again, because they're still building the system. Things aren't even ready to be worked on, but you've managed to insert this little entry point for yourself to start going, as opposed to waiting till later for things to be built and then you're like, oh, I have needs. You get out in front of it.
Love that. What about in Mind Over Magic?
A bit of both. I was very proud that there's a part where you look at the research tree. We were in the dev art stages on that one, but I already knew how to implement my hooks for that particular section of the game. So I just put in my ambience for looking at the tech tree, and they actually made the entire visuals based on my thing.
Wow.
And I was just like, yeah, this is mine. But at the same time, it's not bad to be fed content. It depends on what the team needs, right? Cross-pollination is super cool, but at the same time, we have ship dates. There are reasons why I have to be after animation is done with their work, because I don't know the timings until they're done with their work. So yeah.
What about it when it comes to Aura? What is that experience? How much of an influence did what you
Well,
were
Aura
doing?
was a whole different experience, and a much better experience than from, if I go back to when I started in games, I was in theater before games, did audio for theater. And there's a lot that translated, to be honest with you. That and filmmaking, which I studied in school. But, when I started, it was like you make sounds and you just deliver them. And what happens to them after that you didn't really have much of an influence. How it got mixed or how it got implemented or any of that. It was just, you were just creating assets, But I would say as much as the budget of a game, it makes a difference. It really matters just the kind of mentality that the team has and the designers have and the people with the money have. That makes a big difference, I've worked with many designers, from Sid Meier to Brad Wardell at Stardock, which we did, small budget games at Stardock. It really made a bigger difference how they approached audio, more of a difference than the actual budget, But one thing that happened when I came to Oxide with Aura was that I had a very close relationship going in with the lead designer and with the founders of the company, and there was a trust there, I guess, that they had in me. From prior work I'd done and just along many years of working together. But I was in on day one with the design before, they had done a prototype, but even before pre-production began, I was invited in to do a sound design documentation that included all the audio, music, sound effects, ambience, VO, all of it. So we went in with this sort of a template of what it would be, and so there was a lot of interaction with the designer and a lot of back and forth that did not exist on any previous game I worked on, and that doesn't really have much to do with the budget as it did with just their approach to audio. And their trust in audio actually being able to make a creative input, rather than just sort of in the 11th hour, we need this, we need this, we need this, which is typically how it goes. I mean, and this is, kind of just my experience is that, before I had that kind of trust, I had to just really push it, getting the first live recordings with Civ 5 was a big lift, and coming from a place with a studio and the publisher 2K didn't really have a lot of like, do we really need to do that, and I went out on a limb and pushed that. But so again, I think it's as much about how audio the perception of audio has changed over the past 20 years as it is about budgets. You can do a lot with a small budget.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then that's actually a really great segue into the next section that we want to talk about, which is focusing on the music side. So in terms of collaborating with musicians and performers, so like I was saying in the beginning, this is MAGFest. There's a lot of musicians here. One of the most popular topics that we get requested is surrounding music, and players that come up to us and say, hey, I recorded on this indie game, or I'm a composer, or I'm a sound designer / composer, and I'm trying to do this, and I want to work on X game. And the actual process in which that happens is quite varied. But I'm going to let Michelle dive in here and take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Andre. So I just want to give a brief background first on live recording and on orchestral video game music. So orchestration in games continues to be a regular and popular aspect of video game soundtracks, leading to a continued growth in video game orchestras. And so I actually did some research online to see how many video game orchestras there are in the whole world. And just curious, how many of you are currently or previously affiliated with a video game orchestra? Please raise your hand. Woo. Woo.
This is the right place.
Yeah. And if you aren't, you should join one. So I just did a research online, and for the purposes of this specific graph, I defined video game orchestra as those orchestras that were founded that play either exclusively video game music or partially play it, meaning some orchestras play like video game music / anime or film music kind of combined in one orchestra. So that's how I counted what was considered a video game orchestra for this graph. So if you look at this graph, these are the orchestras I found out all around the world. 29 in the US, 58 internationally, with most of the international ones are in Japan, and most of these are they're just growing. And I might add a fun fact there. So some of you might be familiar with the Gamer Symphony Orchestra. Woo! But the orchestra that I found with the best name globally is called the Those Who Fight Further Orchestra. That's the name of a Final Fantasy piece. And so that was just a lot of fun to see how passionate people are about video game orchestras. And this graph here is actually the signups for the MAGFest Community Orchestra. How many of you are in the MAGFest Community Orchestra this year? Awesome. Yeah. So if you guys don't know, MAGFest has its own orchestra and choir. And actually, just to have a shout out, we have a performance tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. in the atrium, which you guys should come to. We're going to be doing some amazing songs. And the orchestra here at MAGFest started in 2023. You can see on the graph 2024, they added a choir. In 2025, this graph, it was 300 some signups, but that was a week ago. As of yesterday, there were 400 signups for the orchestra, and I've gone to the rehearsals yesterday and today. It's a huge number. It's a huge orchestra. Cool. So there's definitely a huge interest in orchestral video game music. Okay, so getting into our recording sessions, I would like to ask our panelists. Our first question is regarding hiring session players or voice artists. what are your process for finding them? How is that working relationship like?
Going back to, I guess, Civ 5, when we were doing the first live orchestra recordings for Civ 5 and choir, which we did get, thank you 2K. But we had a lot of ethnic and ancient instruments in the score that, I'll be honest with you, I was so grateful to be able to record with a real orchestra that I didn't ask for that. And so we just recorded,
great.
We just used sampled ethnic and ancient
sample
instruments.
library.
And, and that kind of was like that through the rest of my time at Firaxis. They always let us record. We recorded in Prague with the orchestra there that is a producer that used all the main orchestras in Prague. And they were very affordable compared to recording in the U.S. I wish that wasn't the case, but it just is. But when we started ARA, it was like I knew what my budget was, and I knew I had plenty of money for orchestra. And I was like, I want to record everything, anything that is an actual instrument, physical instrument. We're going to do whatever we can to find players to record these parts. Found a guy in Montreal that had a place called La Hacienda Creative. Brian D'Oliveira, I don't know if you know him. He's kind of well known. He's done a lot of game scores and commercial stuff. Sorry. We thought, this is great. One-stop shopping, just go. And he played everything. Like, we saw pictures from his studio, and he had everything. All kinds of bowed instruments.
How did you hear about him?
I don't remember. I think I just found it online. I just
Internet
just
search,
saw it.
social media, maybe?
Maybe. I don't remember exactly, to be honest with you. But I thought, this is great. One-stop shopping. I have the budget to do it. I'm going to go up there and record. So we booked. So the first thing we did with we recorded. We wrote music for the 2 of the 11 themes, and each theme had 12 variations through the eras from ancient through future. And so we had 2 complete 24 pieces of music written with parts written out for these people. And we went up there and we're like, all right, we're going to do it. And so we booked a week figuring we could record these 2 themes. Well, we didn't quite get through it. It was like a lot. And, what we recorded was great, but it was like it became clear by the end of it, we're not going to be able to sustain this we're going to be up there for months at the rate we're going. So we went back to Baltimore, where our studio is, and we're like, well, we had, sound designers in the company. One guitarist, really good guitarist, can play strum, pluck strings. Another player, violin, really great violinist. He can put a bowed string in front of him, he can play it. And the lead designer was a wind player. She could play, So we just went out and bought all these instruments, figuring that if we can get 2 parts out of an instrument that we paid $500 or $1,000 for, we made our money back. And that's what we did. And so we just started recording parts, and we're like, all right, this is way cheaper than going to Montreal and doing it. But we kind of took his example, his business model, and made it our own. But we did find that there were certain instruments we couldn't figure out. I mean, they're just like some crazy instruments. I don't know if you can bring up that. Is this time to do that?
We can't.
We can, or do you want to wait?
I want to. I think
we can wait.
We'll get a couple other answers too, and then we're going to go back.
Okay, great. Because I could go on for 2 hours.
Michael actually has some photos from the process of the game, from the development. There's a lot of documentation. It's actually pretty cool. We'll show it a little bit later too.
Great.
So.
So I didn't work on like a video game orchestra, unfortunately. I did, however, work on like a dialogue pipeline. So when you put on the Vive headset, like it has a localized, localized, I mean, like for a variety of different languages, tutorial to how to use the headset, right? So it takes you just through like prompting you like, do your little clicky, right? So the process with that, like I posted a small snippet on Game Audio Slack, just in case y'all aren't on that. Go talk to Matt Matheson. Tony, I can't remember his last name. Tony is the one who's currently administrating it. But there's just a bunch of secret industry gardens, and there's some that are like way more secret, and there are some that are a lot less secret. They're around. You just kind of got to be like on them and sort of passively kind of looking. There is work here and there. I found 2 people, because I didn't have someone for Japanese and I didn't have someone for mainland China. And so we already had our English person, because she had done the previous tutorial. So we did do a casting call for English, for one person I knew. I feel like I went through, because I did at least want to listen to someone who wasn't, went through puberty as a female. I wanted to at least consider a male at one point. But he had union representation, and it got really complicated very fast. Not to say unions are bad or anything, just know what I'm saying. It just made it complicated, and there was way more friction. And so, I want to say the only other thing I would point out is our mainland Chinese. She spoke, because there's Taiwanese accent versus mainland. 2 nations, 1 people. So what happened was we actually originally had 2. One was going to do the mainland accent, and one was going to do the Taiwanese accent. I liked both. They were great. But the performance for the person who was originally on the mainland accent really wasn't there. And I don't really know how to describe it. It's just there's a part of our art that is truly art. You have to impart that kind of passion in what you're creating, and she just didn't have that. And I think the only reason why I bring it up is that no matter how good you are technically, no matter what you can play, all of that stuff, never forget the heart, because you can go a lot farther with a lot of heart than you can with merely technical skill. That's the only heartfelt thing I will throw out there.
So the Elder Scrolls Online, their soundtracks, those do get recorded also with an orchestra in Prague. So I wonder if it's the same orchestra in Prague.
Probably. It's a production company, but yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't get to, directly work on the soundtrack at ZeniMax Online. Brad Derrick, he's the audio director as well as the composer, and so he writes the music and he has the notation, and he goes to them and then they record. But one of the things that I would say about how you manage the relationship that I saw with him several times is that the players would play the music, and I think this is why you go for real musicians versus using instruments, is that they would then riff on his ideas. Yep. And a thing that he made that was already pretty great, they would be able to inject more of that emotion into it. And I think that that's a willingness that you have to have when working with musicians, is to allow them to bring themselves to the piece that you're working on.
How do musicians get better at learning how to riff off of each other?
Trust in yourself.
I'm leading into this question here because there's a lot of jam sessions here as well. I'm sure a bunch of you in this room, we hear the jam sessions. It's quite impressive, and there's a lot of riffing off of each other. So I'm kind of saying that as a leading question for the MAGFest attendees and those who are musicians and playing in the orchestras and maybe have a background in music technically. This is really important to hear this too, because you're hearing it from somebody that has noticed this and saying, hey, this is really, really important. And not every musician knows that, right? Not everybody knows always what area they should focus on when they're learning music. It's, okay, am I going to focus on the technical skill? Do I have to focus on improv? How important is improv, right? These are all questions that you might not know the answer to. So definitely continue.
I think that there is a degree of importance to it, to have those improv skills, but I think that when you think about it, it comes down more to just being confident in your skills and proactive. And, in any situation, you're going to excel when you're willing to kind of put yourself out on a limb a little bit and, see what happens. And so I think, more than, clearly if you're a musician and you're a working musician, you're going to be talented, you are working at your skill set and your trade, and then you need to couple that with the confidence. You know, we all in our industry talk a lot about our imposter syndrome, about do we deserve this, do we deserve to be here, and I think that everyone who is an artist can really benefit from accepting that they do deserve to be here and they are talented. And I think that that will take you a long way in your relationships with other people, because people recognize that and mirror it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to follow up on that. If let's say someone in the audience wanted to kind of get into game audio on the recording side, what do you look for in terms of hiring? Like, and how should someone best position themselves?
I mean, so I prefer to see a demo of something that I am looking for specifically, because if, like, you're completely off from what I'm looking for, it's not that I don't love you, but, like, you know, you gotta have something on there that looks like what I am trying to buy, right? It is a little scary trying to go into some, like, one of my best friends who used to work at Riot got into the industry without even a website. So, like, it does exist. It's just an ad, though. You need to understand it is just an advertisement. It is not anything about your worth or, like, how good you are. It has nothing to do with how good you are. But it is, however, helpful when you are trying to buy, I don't have to ask them to work for free, so I can know and evaluate and judge between these three. Ease of use, like always think about ease of use. Have someone, your friend on some phone, go and look at your stuff and see, like, does the thing load? Does it load in Firefox? Does it load, like, stupid stuff, guys. Stupid stuff. Always think of the stupid stuff first.
So it sounds like a lot of it is related to like ease of use, and they want to see you, like, have direct relevant experience, will put you in the best position.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else to add?
I mean, it's a complicated question and it's a complicated answer. I mean, I know that especially nowadays, working at an indie studio that announced recently that we had gotten funding, that every day in LinkedIn, I have a half a dozen people who are musicians or sound designers or composers contacting me with their pitch, you know, and
Special.
you know, how do you stand out? How do you stand out in that?
Right.
You know, and I think that what I always come back to, like, you know, my life before video games was in the music world and in the event promotion world, and what was very important there was the personal connections and friendships. And I think that the same thing holds true, you know, when you're trying to work in games on this side of things. Nothing will ever beat coming here or going to a GDC or going to GameSoundCon or getting into a Discord. Like, you know, Megan's talking about a Slack. There's multiple Discords. Megan Presley runs a amazing sound designer Discord. I think there's like close to 6,000 people in it now. You know, that's where you get work. That's where you meet people. That's where you find things. That's where you forge bonds. You know, like, that's really the truth. That's how you position yourself, is by being there. You know, like, everybody can make, I guess that's my point, is that everybody can make a website. Everybody can make a YouTube video. You know, great. People want to know that you're cool to work with and that you're a nice person as well as talented, you know, and so it just, like, that's part of the legwork of getting in there is, you know, again, being confident and putting yourself into the situations where you can succeed.
So it's all about who you know. Sounds like.
But who you
have to
know
be
is pretty
good, too.
easy to meet if you are a nice person and you get out there and you, like, you know, take a chance.
Yeah. Thank you. Michael, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, just, I mean, perhaps it was a little more unique in my project. I mean, we did have, like I said, we had all these variations of each theme, and many of them were orchestral and like Middle Ages and medieval. We recorded Morin Kerr Ensemble in Mongolia, but there was a lot of other stuff we had to record, and it was mostly soloists. So we recorded a lot of soloists, and many of the parts were traditional orchestral instruments, you know, violin, cello, bass, trumpet and horn and flutes and such. But the one thing, but we needed them to kind of branch out. We had all these instruments, we bought them, and what I found was there were orchestral players, and these were all local Mid-Atlantic players, playing the different orchestras in the area professionally, and some were very timid about going outside their comfort zone and trying different things, So that was a key factor in who we wanted to work with, because if we found a horn player that was willing to try a Tibetan horn or a Roman
pictures, right?
Yeah, you can bring the pictures up, or a Roman litius horn. They were like, and they were like excited about it. We were like, all right, you're going to be fine, But we did find others, who just, they didn't want to do it. They were just too they didn't want to venture outside their.
You can scroll through.
Yeah, you can click on that one, and I don't know if you can bring them up separately. But anyway, that's La Hacienda, where we thought we would record everything, and you can see all these. Oh no, that's Mongolia. That's the Morning Chur Ensemble. All right, you can move to the next one. I want to get through these because I got a lot of pictures. All right, yeah, go to the Yangklung.
All right, here we go.
All right, so this is a guy we found, percussionist in Maryland, who traditional orchestral percussionist, but he happened to be a percussion hoarder, and I mean he had everything, and he had this thing which is an angklung, Indonesian angklung. Anyway, so that's our studio in Timonium. But anyway, so we found these players that were like, yeah, we play, he's a marimba player, but I'm also really interested in these other things, and that was like just what we needed. In any case, that's just kind of an overview of what we did, and we found tons of players in the area, and where we didn't, we found a trombone player who played accordions and bagpipes. And we had this instrument called a sheng, which is a Chinese. That's him. Go to the next picture. Wait.
This one?
You can go to that one. That's cool. She's playing. That's at La Hacienda. She's playing.
Oh no.
You lost your. You lost it. All right. Well, whatever.
All right.
All right. Anyway. Yeah.
I can't
forget it.
Okay.
Forget it. Anyway, there's this instrument called a sheng. It's a Chinese mouth organ, but it looks like a pipe organ that you stick in your mouth. And we couldn't find anybody. We bought one. We couldn't figure out no one knew how to play it, but we found this guy who played the trombone and the bagpipes. He was like, I know someone who plays that, and she lives in New York, and so we went up there and recorded her. But so one thing leads to another. I mean, that's how I found musicians, because if I go back 15 years, I didn't know where to begin. I had no idea where to find these people. Yeah. But you start, and it leads to more and more. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. That's a great segue into, let's look at how is it coordinated and what your expectations are when recording.
Yeah, to elaborate on that question too, I think going into some of the positive or negative experiences, you all kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are some experiences where you had an expectation that wasn't met, or that you thought you wanted something and then you realized, oh, this isn't working out? Like, how did you actually handle that?
Well, I mean, I kind of already alluded to it, but I'll just reiterate. I actually I did speak Mandarin. I lived in Shanghai for a year, international studies student, that kind of thing, lived abroad for a year. So when we got the gal who was doing the mainland accent at the time, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I am a voice actor, but you can, already, just in hearing me talk briefly, know that I can enunciate, I can do the melodic waving to make it sound cool and exciting, right? I can perform, right? And if I had chosen a different path, I could have gone that way, right? And she just, she was speaking the way that people who do not perform audio speak, because she was just saying the words. She wasn't enunciating the feeling of like investigating this thing and like, you know, like impressed that the, like, I don't know how to describe it. But like the thing I remember most was that I remember going home that night, and of course, like on the bus, I was just like perusing Twitter like a moron. And like, I was just like, you know what? It is so expensive to hire an amateur. Like, professionals are so cheap. They are just so cheap. Amateurs are expensive.
That's a good quote.
And like, you know, I know, like, I will never, ever reveal who this person was, by the way. Like, no, like, I am not gonna ever reveal that. But like, I think that that's the one thing that I would really, really highly recommend you do when you are the amateur who's trying to do their first one. Just relax, become the vessel for the creative spirit that is moving through you, and be easy to work with.
I should have put that in big bold quotes there. Easy to work with. That applies in so many scenarios. Be easy to work with. This is not even just for performance. Though this is like it. You want to be easy to work with in as many scenarios as possible, because many times you will see projects, and we're talking. This is in games. This is in films. This is in when you're working. Like, let's just take any creative field here. A lot of times you'll see certain names associated with projects, and it might not be because that person, that composer, that sound designer was the better sound designer or the better composer, but because they were easier to work with, or they were better collaborators. You know, I had experience because I also worked on the film side, so I've had that experience as well, where it's like, you know, I might hire a composer for my project that just spoke a different way because they were able to. Yeah, sometimes it gets down to that, because it's like, okay, I have 15 other people that I have to talk to on a daily basis. I just need to know that if I communicate this idea to you, and the way that you will respond to this idea, the way the iterative process, or the bouncing back and forth, that willingness to brainstorm, even that can make a huge difference, because then my trust increases and I say, okay, I'm going to go focus on this thing, and I know you got this. And they might not have been the stronger composer, but I knew that it would be cheaper to go with them, because it's also going to take a lot less time to correct and give. There's less feedback involved, and that process is really, really important, very valuable, especially when we're talking about crunch times and how you have these strict schedules. So.
Yeah, personality is important.
Say that again.
Personality is important. Don't be an asshole.
Other big quote.
You can quote me.
I should have got these quotes ahead of time.
Okay.
So the best piece of advice, I know this isn't a how to get into game audio panel, I know, but when I was getting in back in 2010, I was at a panel. I had no idea I wanted to do audio ever. I went to PAX to go see the guy who did the sound design for Don't Starve, because that was a cool game, guys. That turkey, like dude, that game sounded. So the two pieces of advice I got out of that panel was, first, do not be an asshole. It is a very small, tight-knit community. The second piece of advice is, you do not always have to work for money, but never work for free.
Great. All right. I think that will be a great transition into our Q&A.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Please give a round of applause for our amazing panelists. Thank you all. That was really, really great. So with that being said, we will now take questions. So if anybody has anything that they heard that they want to dig into, now is the time. Right there, starting for.
You mentioned like a reel, like a type of demo reel. What would that look like for a sound designer?
Okay, all right, we can talk about that a lot. It depends, but the first thing that if you have no experience, if you haven't worked on a game and you haven't shipped a game, you need to look for and find some bits from games that you enjoy. And you need to strip the audio that's in it out, ignore its existence, and redo it. And also recognize that what you're doing needs to be as good or better than what was there because someone already did it that good. But that's going to be a really good place for you to start, is you want to grab anything you can get your hands on that looks cool, and you're going to do sound design to it. There's debate about using library material at this stage. I think that it's permissible, but you're always going to come off better if you made your sounds, if you did the synth work, if you recorded the sounds that you're using. And so that's what that's going to look like. You're going to want to do something that's 3 minutes or less. You're going to want to try to show a variety of sounds, a variety of situations. I would say if you are a person who also writes music, but you are trying to get a job as a sound designer, so is everybody. If you're applying for a sound design job, and I'm just going to say this bluntly, no one's interested in your music. We're interested in your ability to make a fireball. And so I would say that that's pretty much what you're looking for, is to find clips that you're inspired by, put the sounds in them. If you want to go a step further, there was a big debate in one of the discords that I'm in recently about whether or not you want to have implementation experience to get involved, and kind of the overwhelming feeling was, yes, you are going to want some sort of experience with implementing the sounds into the game. There's a lot of resources to do that. Wise has courses and projects that you can get your hands on that you can then learn and change and show that you know how to get a sound implemented into the game and put that kind of thing out. Yeah. It's a lot of what you would do.
I'll throw in my 2 cents on that one. Like I said, the person who is one of my best friends, who was ex-Riot, got Riot with with no demo reel. They had a website with a couple pictures of things that they had worked on. That is it. You do not need to have a demo. However, it does make it a lot easier if you have one. You do not need one, though. It is not what you are worth as an artist. Make sure you understand that. That being said, the thing about the music, it's not a joke. I like, seriously, if you want to pursue a sound designer position for a game company, no music whatsoever. Separate websites, hardcore, not joking. You will be absolutely culled 100% of the time if there's any music on your website whatsoever. And it's actually kind of a problem because I actually kind of view music and sound as a spectrum. Like, dude, I get nervous about having like drone pads because like, oh my God, people can confuse that with music. Another thing, when I was leaving HTC trying to get this job, right? Like, my best piece of work, unfortunately, had music in it, which I did not write because I am not a composer. And it's like this thing where it's like, well, I guess I could just deliver the sounds, but it's gonna be kind of weird. In addition, it's kind of a double standard because like working with the composer that I did, like we talked about like, okay, I can own the bass line, you're working up in the high with little timpani like thingies. Like that's actually something that people are trying to buy, is that expertise of working, frequency bending. But at the same time, like when people are just like going through and like, dude, you have a minute. You have another thing that someone who I worked for at Amazon, his name's Chris Hegstrom, he said, you are competing with a sandwich. Because the audio director is sitting, he's eating his hoagie, ham, cheese, really good garlic aioli. You are competing with that sandwich for attention. You've got to beat that sandwich, guys. Don't forget that. And the reason why I bring that up is, again, you got to have ease of use. You have to be kind of on it. I personally thought that I needed to have like a lot of like gun stuff because there's a lot of gun games out there. I don't really feel that anymore. It really depends on like where you're trying to go, that kind of thing. That being said, my big reel was the Halo redesign from Hexany, like way back when. So I don't know, kind of a double standard by saying that, but you know.
Great.
It was a great question and some great answers.
I just want to add to that. It doesn't hurt to have multiple reels as well. So if there's like any different genres that you're trying to develop sound for, just have multiple reels. But then whatever job that you're applying for, use that reel.
It's also a really great way to figure out whether or not you actually like to do the work, because it is a real slog to do your own real work for free when you have the time to do it.
All right, well,
Utilize sound tests as real opportunities. Like that is a great way to get good reels, is to like basically, oh, you want me to do your test for you? Okay, well, I get a reel out of it. And it also keeps your reel like fresh because you're doing tests as you go. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
well, I'm going to contradict what my fellow panelists just said.
Spicy takes!
Strongly.
This is what you all came for. Okay.
Let's go.
All right, so I don't know, in terms of giving advice to anybody trying to get a job in the industry, it's, I've been lucky. I'll be honest with you. I've been really lucky, and it's had a lot to do with who I knew. I've never had a resume, never had a reel. I was lucky when I went to Firaxis. They hired me to do some sound design, and I said, hey, because I finished it quickly. I said, hey, can I write a piece of music? And they were like, sure. And they let me do that. I've hired a lot of audio designers over the years. I heard a lot of people out of Peabody Conservatory. I don't know if you're familiar with, they have a recording arts program. Really smart people. Every one of them has been able to hit the ground running with sound design and music. And I look for sound designers that have a musical background. That's just me. I kind of feel like if you got an ear for music, you got an ear for sound. And I'm fully, of the philosophy, like there's a composer, Varese, early 20th century, that looked at music composition as sound design. And that is how I compose. It's how I did Aura. I wrote a design doc for Aura that took all of audio into consideration. Music, UI, voiceover, ambience, all of it. And I'd done a number of these games before. And the goal that I set out was to just sort of like really, merge all of that, which is kind of partly what those motifs that come off the ground did. They just sort of connected all together because it comes off as ambience. There's a lot of electronic ambience in my scores, regardless of what time period I'm composing for. There's a lot of, it's all fair game. It's all sound. Anyway, sorry.
No, I completely agree with you. I think it's complete BS.
And maybe I've been lucky
people...
in that I've hired a lot of music people that just, they were great at sound design. I don't know.
Yeah.
I do have one question, though. You mentioned that when you're making your portfolio website, you wanted to specifically have tailored sound. What if you have multiple backgrounds? Like you're like, I am mainly a sound designer, but I also do music composition on the side, and I also do audio mixing and mastering, and they're all on my portfolio website. If I were to just, let's say, apply for a job and then point to only the links that have the sounds that I make, does it really matter if the others are on my website?
So, in my opinion, and again, I've just
Repeat
been...
the question.
Oh, repeat the question.
Yeah, big
Yeah.
sign.
So we're going to repeat the question so people in the back could hear it. So I think the question was if you're doing both sound design and music composition, multiple backgrounds.
Music composition, sound design, mixing, mastering, having all of that on the portfolio.
On the website, but if I were to just send the job position only my sound design stuff, doesn't matter if my website has the other stuff.
Can I answer just and to undo everything I just said?
Dang straight.
You have to know who your target is, who you're applying the job with. It is true that most studios do see a distinct difference between sound design and composition. And in that regard, you are both right and I am wrong. But there are other, like when I look for, I look at it all, but you got to know who your target audience is,
I mean, I basically agree with that. Like you want to be like, when we're hiring someone for a position, we're looking at 100 people applying. Well, probably 300 applied, and probably like 40 or 50 made it through to us. And we're looking for very specific things. If we listen to your reel and we're like, damn, that's good, then we're going to go to your website and we're going to see the other things that you do. But if you just send us a jumble of stuff and the first thing I click is like, wait, this is for music mastering? Okay, nope, let's go, next. So like it's perfectly fine to have it there, but you need to laser focus your entry,
So if the reel is just sound design, that would be enough.
Yeah, because if I like it, then I'll be like, oh, this guy's pretty cool. This stuff sounds really good. What else does this guy do? And then we're like, oh, he's super talented. Let's get him in here.
Yeah, we had a question over here. Yeah, first.
As a sound designer, how much are you expected to work with composers? Because as a composer myself, I use sound design in my compositions, so I'm not sure if you need like a sound designer and a composer to work together to put that all into one thing, or if it's completely different.
Well, the answer is it depends.
All right, moving on.
In my mind, that's ideal.
All right, repeat the question. The question was, if you are a composer, do you always need a sound designer involved to bring everything together, or is being a composer enough in some situations? And the answer is yes, it's enough in some situations. You have people like Martin Stig Anderson, who's an amazing composer. A lot of his music is very integrated into the sound design. When I was in Sweden working at IOI, Nielsen, the composer that does all the Hitman games, and he composes for all of those games, he's very integrated into the system. He actually comes to the studio and spends weeks with us in the studio with a little mobile rig where he'll just sit in the room with one of the sound designers and they will go back and forth, and he will write music and hand it over, and we'll put it right into the game, and we'll set up the systems and things like that. And so it really is just like, it depends on the person. Then you have like Enon Zur on the other side of the spectrum, who does all of the Bethesda games. You say what you want and he delivers the music, and that's it. He doesn't have anything to do with the sound design, but his music is very sound designy, right? So yeah, there's your answer.
Here.
What tools do you like to use and work with in working with sound design?
Oh, this will be a fun. I feel like there's going to be interesting answers across this.
What DAW?
What DAWs or tools do you like to use in working with sound?
The DAW that I use has changed over the years. They're all good. They're all hard to get used to when you switch, but I've switched many times.
So sorry.
But I found one that's like, oh, the rest suck. I use Nuendo now.
Which one?
Nuendo. Cubase, same thing.
Oh yeah, I use Reaper. I use Reaper because it was only $75 to get in. So like, yeah.
That's so true.
There is no good DAW. This is like Mac versus PC, guys. Like, it does not matter.
Well, I'm going to.
You go ahead. Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with my panelists here.
Spicy take.
Wait.
I also use Reaper. I've been using Reaper for about a decade now. I think that Reaper has quickly nowadays established itself as, the industry standard for what most sound designers are using. Definitely people coming up in the industry are using Reaper pretty exclusively. One of the major parts of that is that the amount of things that are being made specifically for sound designers by sound designers to use in Reaper. One of the good examples is Nick Von Canel, who works at Sony. He has a complete toolkit at this point. He is a sound designer and he's a tech guy. You can get all of Nick's stuff and you can have like a complete toolkit that will teach you how to do sound design. The ability to write scripts in Reaper. I'm in groups where people are constantly like, how do I turn this one thing into an action? Reaper allows you to do that. It's very versatile. It's a one-stop shop for sound design. I would never use it to write music.
All right.
I think we have time for maybe 2 questions, but one more over here.
Fight.
So you said that around 400 people applied to that position you were talking about, but only about 40 to 50 people make it through to you. So what exactly prevents like those other 350 people from making it through?
You'd have to ask somebody who works in HR.
Ease of use.
You just can't access the website or something?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Okay.
It didn't work on Firefox.
It didn't work over. No, it's like, okay, so like, I actually got the numbers for when I was hired at HTC for my first time. So I beat out 550 applicants for a sound design internship at HTC. It wasn't even close, folks. I blew the competition completely 100% out of the water. They were so wildly excited to work with me. Now, admittedly, I was coming off a contract from Microsoft doing Altspace, so like, yeah, I was kind of in their like persona, right? Like there was vibes, right? But the thing is like that's kind of it. You're already in the zone, and then it's just like, oh my God, this person is perfect, right? It depends on it. Is the client like super generalized needs and just kind of needs someone? Or do they need someone really, really specifically and highly complement out exactly what they need, right? Like, sure, you can say, like, I will say ease of use is a big deal. It is a big deal. But segmenting yourself out into, like, I do this, and, like, staking out that I do this, all you have to make sure is that there's enough clients who can pay you to do that, and you're good.
Yeah, so it sounds like having that niche that people are really after is what kind of separates you from everybody else, and something to think about.
But to more directly answer your question, like when we're doing a hiring rec, we provide to HR a list of like, these are the things that we're looking for. And it's their job to then comb through it and find the things that we're looking for. And so it's very important that you essentially include as many of those buzzwords as you can. You know, include Wise, include Unreal, include Reaper, include Nuendo, you know, include all these things that you know how to do that will get caught in these filters that people increasingly use so that you will get through that first screening.
All right, we're going to do one more really quick question right here.
Okay, so you mentioned like recording your own sounds, and it's like, how often do you do that like out in the wild, and what would your setup for that be if you do that?
That's fun.
Well, hey, if it's fun,
yeah.
you should go.
Okay, so my personal setup, these days what I carry around with me to most places, I'm actually surprised I didn't bring it with me today, is I use a Zoom F3. They're small, they do 32-bit float recording. It's got a lot of noise in the line, you get a lot of room there, but, and then I like to use LOM Uzis because they're small, and then also Clippies. Which are these, I like to buy, I'm like into boutique mics. And so LOMs, they come around every once in a while. They're hard to get your hands on, but Clippies are pretty readily available. And they're like $80 each. And then you have your little tripod and you have your stand so that you can set them up HRTF so that you can so that you can record the sound sounding good. And then I just have a little kit. I have a little bag that I carry with me that just has all of that stuff in it. Tripod, stand for the mics, 2 little mics that normally would be used for recording instruments, and a little handheld recorder, and you just set it up and go.
So I got in when I was 26, I think. Yeah. I decided I wanted to do this, and like I wasn't gonna like quit my job to like go do this. So what I decided was like, okay, I've saved up $1,000. We're gonna go out and we're gonna buy this recorder, portable recorder. It's called PCM D100, fancy. It's so much more expensive now. I wish I had bought two.
They're like secret weapons. They're really good.
They're seriously like I was like, I will never buy another. I will not spend money on anything else until I have made like enough money to live on. Like this is it. Well, I also bought headphones, but like okay, so it's a set of headphones, PCMD, and a portable recorder, and like I think that was actually really good because like I decided that I wanted to get something like high end because I never wanted it to be, oh, it's the limitations of my gear. I wanted it to always be my fault that it sounds like shit. And oh my God, did it sound like crap for a long time. I'm so sorry. I have only had like 4 hours of sleep. And anyway, I wanted it to always be my fault so that it was always me progressing in my sound design, in my recording. That's why I went way too high probably. You can always go down, like do the A10 with the clippies. That's like $150, $200. Yeah. Don't go out and spend $1,000 unless you're really sure.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that is a great point to end on. Please give a round of applause for our amazing panelists here today.